September 1943, the Solomon Islands. A dense, unbroken canopy of jungle choked the volcanic slopes of New Georgia, where the air was so saturated with moisture that drawing breath felt like gulping from a warm, tropical sea. Somewhere under that vaulted green ceiling, a 23-year-old Marine from the hills of Tennessee lay still as stone in a hollow filled with damp, decaying palm fronds. The stock of his rifle was cool against his cheek, his eyes methodically tracing the tree line 200 yards distant. He had occupied that precise spot for 11 hours straight. He hadn't shifted, hadn't eaten, and had scarcely blinked. Private First Class Daniel Raymond Whitmore believed the next few hours would alter the very rhythm of the Pacific War in his tiny, violent corner of it. What he didn't yet grasp was that his unorthodox means of communication would become lore among his brothers in arms, pored over by tacticians for generations, and would ultimately reveal that the most decisive weapons in any clash aren't forged of steel, but are born of the wind, the trees, and the wild. Before we begin, if you're enjoying these deep dives into history, consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a comment below to tell me where you're joining from. Your support makes stories like this possible. What started as a simple country craft, learned at his grandfather's side in the misty Appalachians of eastern Tennessee, was about to transform Daniel Whitmore from an unknown infantryman into arguably the most lethal unseen marksman the Pacific had ever known. Over 4 relentless months, armed only with preternatural aim and the flawless imitation of a Pacific golden plover's cry, he would single-handedly and silently remove 76 enemy combatants from the battlefield without ever being discovered. This is the tale of how a boyhood pastime became the cipher to a military feat without precedent. Daniel Whitmore was raised in the hamlet of Copper Ridge, cradled in the Appalachian foothills about 40 miles northeast of Knoxville. His grandfather, Elijah Whitmore, had been a woodsman his whole life, putting meat on the family table with knowledge passed through 5 generations. By the age of 7, Daniel had already absorbed the fundamentals of tracking, stillness, and, most crucially, the craft of avian mimicry. Elijah held that to know the birds was to know the woods. Birds are the sentries of the wild, he'd say. They shout warnings, they whisper safety. They'll tell you everything moving in the shadows, if you know how to listen. And if you can speak their tongue, you can walk through these trees as one of their own. Daniel spent countless dawns in those Tennessee hollows, learning to cradle his hands just so, to shape his tongue against his palate, to govern his breath in precise ways that conjured the exact trills and whistles of a dozen local species. By 12, he could lure in wild turkeys with such authenticity that seasoned hunters would stare in wonder. By 15, he commanded the calls of over 40 different birds. His grandfather would smile and say Daniel had the gift, the same gift that had kept Whitmore bellies full through a century of hard winters. When Daniel enlisted in the Marine Corps in January of 1942, mere weeks after the attack that thrust America into the war, he never dreamed those sylvan lessons would become the bedrock of his service. He was assigned to the 3rd Marine Division, excelling in marksmanship training at Camp Pendleton. But his true calling remained dormant until he stepped into the suffocating green labyrinth of the Solomons. The fight for New Georgia, beginning in late June 1943, was a brutal war of attrition within a steam bath of disease and tangled roots. The Japanese defenders were masters of concealment, turning the jungle itself into a lethal, invisible fortress. Casualties mounted from unseen shooters, patrols vanished. It was a conflict to be won not by force, but by ghost-like patience. Whitmore's company was tasked with securing ridges overlooking the crucial Munda Point airfield. Stalled and pinned by fire from an invisible nest during his second week in July, Whitmore proposed an idea to his desperate squad leader, Sergeant Marcus Thompson. He'd noticed the jungle birds had fallen silent in one specific direction, a classic sign of human presence. More than that, he believed he could use their language to talk to his squad. With skeptical permission granted, Whitmore slithered out alone. Every few minutes, he paused and issued the clear, mournful cry of a Pacific golden plover, a common shorebird whose call would raise no alarm. But to the Marines holding position, each sequence was a message: moving, target located, stand ready. It took him 3 agonizing hours to cover 150 yards. He found 3 enemy soldiers dug in at the base of a giant banyan tree. They never heard the shot that took the first man. Within 7 minutes, all 3 were neutralized. Whitmore gave the all-clear call, and his squad moved up to find him calmly cleaning his rifle. When asked how he'd done it, he simply said, "My granddaddy always told me, if you speak the forest's language, the forest will hide you." Word spread like wildfire. Soon, Whitmore was assigned to Captain Harold Bennett, a former ornithology professor who immediately grasped the brilliance of the method. Birds are the perfect medium, Bennett later wrote. They are everywhere, they are expected, and they are utterly ignored by the enemy. It is hiding in plain sound. Under Bennett, Whitmore developed a full lexicon of plover calls, different rhythms for numbers, distances, and urgency. He trained a select group, dubbing them the Avian Communication Corps. Between July and November 1943, he conducted 37 missions. His confirmed tally reached 76 enemy soldiers, eliminated without ever revealing his position or causing a single Marine casualty. The psychological impact was profound. Japanese soldiers began reporting that the jungle itself hunts us. Diaries spoke of a supernatural dread. We have begun to fear the birds. When they sing, we cannot know if it is nature or the American ghost. Whitmore's technique reached its zenith when he learned to manipulate real birds, attracting them to his area with calls so their natural chorus would mask his movements and signals. He had become a conductor of the jungle's symphony. His reputation eventually brought him before Major General Alan Turnage. Skeptical of the reports, the general demanded a demonstration. With Marines positioned hundreds of yards away, Whitmore relayed complex instructions using only bird calls. Every message was received perfectly. The general stared in silence before uttering, "This changes things." A classified 47-page manual, Field Communication Through Natural Sound Mimicry, was created from his methods. Yet at its heart, the skill required an innate gift that couldn't be fully taught. Whitmore himself remained humble, writing home to his mother, "I think about Grandpa Elijah every day out here. I hope he'd be proud, but I hope he'd understand I'm just trying to bring the boys home." He rotated home in early 1944, receiving the Silver Star for his extraordinary initiative and innovative tactical communication. After the war, he returned to Copper Ridge, took over the family hardware store, married his sweetheart, and raised a family. He seldom spoke of the war, known locally just as the man who could call in a turkey like nobody's business. His story was largely forgotten until the 1980s, when a historian rediscovered the old manual and tracked him down. The resulting book brought his saga to light, though Whitmore always deflected praise to his grandfather and the Marines who had trusted his signals. Daniel Raymond Whitmore passed away in 2007 at age 87. He was buried in the Copper Ridge churchyard, his headstone adorned with a simple engraving of a bird in flight. At his funeral, as his son read from one of his wartime letters, a perfect Pacific golden plover call echoed through the chapel, a final tribute from the family of a comrade, a final message sent in the silent language he had mastered. The American official history grants him only a footnote. But for those who study the art of war, Whitmore's legacy is a timeless lesson that profound advantage can lie in the most unexpected skills, that understanding your environment is the ultimate tactical tool, and that sometimes the most powerful force on any battlefield is a man who listens and speaks to the wild.